You may remember last week we were considering a text which came from the prophecy of Micah. Micah chapter 7 and verse 8. Rejoice not against me, O mine enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me. And in many respects, we shall be returning to the theme of this text tonight also. Last time, we considered the first half. Rejoice not against me, O mine enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. And we mainly focused our thoughts and our attention upon those words, when I fall, I shall arise. The confidence of the man of God that he has in his God, when he is a true believer in Jesus Christ, and he knows that even if he should fall into sin, even when it happens, he shall arise. Even when the foe beats him down and all things seem to be going against him, and he seems that he cannot cease from sin, yet he knows he shall arise. Not as an encouragement to sin, of course, but rather as a preventative, and something to encourage us when we are in such a state that there is yet hope. But the text goes on. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me. Well, let us consider for a few moments, when might the Christian be sitting in darkness? At what times particularly will he find himself in a dark situation, where he cannot see what he ought to do? He cannot see any hope whatsoever. He cannot see any joy or anything in continuing in life. All seems darkness about him. It is not even as though there were the street lights of the town to brighten his mind. Sometimes there are those times when all is dim, save those. But this is a real darkness. This is the darkness of a cloudy night in the countryside. There is no moon to be seen, for the clouds cover it. There are no stars to give any light, for they likewise are covered. And there are no lights from man, for it is not the abode of man. All is dark, and it is real darkness. It is pitch black, as we say. So black that you cannot see your hand. Sometimes the Christian will be in such a state as this. Sometimes he will sit in black darkness and there will be nothing. Well, there are many ways we might consider this. We might consider the reasons why the man of God might be in darkness at times. We might consider also where the man of God might seek to gain light from at such times. And these two particular things we shall seek to draw out tonight as we consider this text. When I sit in darkness, when may the man of God sit in darkness? Well, we read together from Psalm 77. We read there of Asaph's experience, I should say, when he was in darkness. Asaph, when he wrote this psalm, was not in a good place. It has been said by some that this is one of the most miserable psalms in the book. And you can see in some respects why that would be the case. Here was a man who cried unto God. He lived in a day of trouble. His sword ran in the night and ceased not. His soul refused to be comforted. He remembered God and was troubled. He complained. His spirit was overwhelmed. His eyes were held from sleep. He was so troubled he could not even utter words. And my friends, we see him here in a truly miserable state. Sometimes we may lose sleep over things. We may begin to feel something of this way. But here it is as though calamity after calamity has come upon this man, and there is no ceasing from it. It is one thing after another. And he comes to this state where he says, will the Lord cast off forever? Is there any hope? Will he be favorable no more? Has his mercy all run out? Is his mercy clean gone forever? Doth his promise fail forevermore? Hath God forgotten to be gracious? Hath he in anger shut up his tender mercies? And so he goes on. But he is in a miserable state. Things have come to such a pass that this is how he feels. This is how he is. It's not just feeling. This is his real state. Well, my friends, what brought this about? And how did he come to such a place as this? How did all this happen? Well, troubles came upon him. Say this is obvious, but indeed it is so. And we may not suppose that they were necessarily merely spiritual troubles. They may have been so, but they may likewise have been temporal troubles. It may be that in such a case, he found himself in trouble because of the enemy. He found himself in this position of darkness because of the fact that it seemed as though the enemy was gaining the upper hand. It seemed as though the world was conquering. Satan was making great victories. He was tearing down strongholds. And the work of the gospel was languishing in the dust. Such may have been his day of trouble. It's a day of trouble perhaps we fail to think of as much as we ought. That is truly a day of trouble. We read sometimes in the Psalms of David speaking of his enemy, and we may be tempted to discount it and to say, well, we do not really have that many enemies. It is still a time when many people can go out on the streets and they can preach on the streets, they can witness on the streets, they can hand out tracts on the streets, and they will not have the slightest problem at all. They won't have any resistance, but they will have apathy. And my friends, this is as bad as anything else. They will have those who really have no interest whatsoever. They're quite content to go on. And these are the enemies of the cross. They do not serve Christ. And it may be that looking on these things, we may be caused to become very discouraged and downcast in our minds. We may have darkness about us. So it is in this land at this present time. We have darkness all around us. We know of many who have to travel for much time, many minutes and even some hours who travel to find a faithful place of worship where they can meet. There is much darkness. In that sense, there are few faithful places of worship, but there is much darkness in another sense, in that there are very few who believe on the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and are willing to serve him. It's not everything to serve the Lord. There are many Christians who are very good Christians who cannot get out and serve in an obvious way, but they must serve through prayer and they must never be despised. But in a general, we can see it as a day of much darkness, a day of much grief, and much reason why we might become depressed and downcast and grievously afflicted as Asaph here. This is an outward thing. We considered before sins as being something which might cause a man to fall, and sin may cause a man to fall into darkness. It may cause a man to fall into such a state that he does not know if there is any hope left for him. He does not know if there is any grace or mercy that might be shown to him. But we dealt with this at length last week, and I do not intend to repeat myself tonight. That is another thing, though. It may be that personal circumstances will also lead to us becoming in darkness or depression. And personal circumstances here embraces a whole realm, as it were, of different problems and difficulties. They may be issues with assurance of salvation. There may be issues with guidance. There may be issues with family difficulties which have come about, tensions in the family perhaps. Perhaps you are grieving over the loss of a loved one in the family. And there may be so many other different problems. But these personal matters can really affect us. They may seem to be outward things, or perhaps they may seem to be inward things. But whatever they are, they truly affect us. And sometimes they can affect our physical faculties, even as with the psalmist here. He could not sleep. He could not speak because of the affliction he was under because of these troubles. We do not know specifically what his were. but he was in darkness, all right. But then there are always inward difficulties, inward trials and inward problems. And these, my friends, can often be the result of the work of Satan. These can often be his work in us to try to deceive us, to lead us away, to tempt us to sin, and perhaps to tempt us to unbelief. Temptation to unbelief is surely one of those things which Satan tempts us to, which we so often will readily overlook and forget about, but it is a very real thing. Satan will tempt us to doubt God. He will cause us to wonder whether God really exists, whether God really is able to do what he has done before, to doubt whether God can even do what he has promised to do, and what he has said he will do, and what he has sworn that he will do. And God can never lie. Such temptations can bring much darkness to us also. We can then begin to fall into this cycle of thinking, well, I'm having all these temptations. Satan is attacking my mind. But can I really be a true Christian if Satan is attacking my mind? I'm having these thoughts coming into my mind and I cannot seem to prevent them. Am I really a Christian? Am I really saved? And so doubts begin to creep in, and they accumulate and they keep on coming. And if we are not careful, we can fall even into doubt by these things. We can fall into the sin of unbelief, though we are saved people. This is one of Satan's wiles, of which we must so beware of. Well, the psalmist then, he is in a strait. And he comes to this point, eventually. The first verse, we could say, is as it were a testimony. He looks back in hindsight, and he sees this as a testimony. I cried unto God with my voice, even unto God with my voice, and he gave ear unto me. That's his testimony. Now he begins to explain what happened. And as we have seen, he is in darkness. But now the darkness seems to have intensified to the point where he comes out and in an outcry, as it were, from verse 7, he comes and says, will the Lord cast off forever? Will he be favorable no more? Is his mercy clean gone forever? Doth his promise fail forevermore? Hath God forgotten to be gracious? Hath he in anger shut up his tender mercies? And here we see a very confused mind. When we are in darkness, friends, when we struggling spiritually as Christian people, we have all manner of problems all around us and we can't see our way. We cannot even see with the eye of faith to look to Christ very well at all. All is blurred and dimmed to our sight. Sometimes we can become very muddled and mixed up in our minds. This is what we see here. We see the psalmist, in a manner of speaking, questioning God. Will the Lord cast off forever? He begins with this question, and in some respects, we may say this is a very right question to ask. It is one that we might repeat in our prayers. Wilt thou, O Lord, cast us off forever? We trust and we believe that he won't, but we plead with him thus. Will he be favorable no more? Will he show no mercy to us? Will he not come in and act on our behalf? And yet when he begins to intensify, even sometimes we might be reluctant to go so far. And yet some will say that it is right to do so. It is lacking from our prayers that we do not plead thus with the Lord. Is his mercy clean gone forever? Doth his promise fail forevermore? And then it intensifies to the point where, at least to our minds, it seems almost to be blasphemous. Hath God forgotten to be gracious? How can this be? How can God forget to be gracious? He cannot. But he can do none of these things. Will the Lord cast off forever? Not his people he cannot. He is bound to them by an oath, and he cannot forsake them. Will he be favorable no more? Nay, It would not be right with his nature. He could not bring himself to do it, as it were, to cast off his people and to show them no more favor. Is his mercy clean gone forever? Well, it might seem like it. It might seem that there may be no mercy for you, and there should be no mercy for you, but there should never have been mercy for you at the first. Why should you ever have seen any? Because of Christ. And because of Christ, there is mercy. There was mercy at the first, and there still is mercy tonight. Does this promise fail forevermore? Nay, for he is an unchanging God, unchangeable God. Jesus Christ, the same, yesterday, today, and forever. How can his promise fail? God cannot lie. He cannot. It would be incongruent to his very nature to lie. He cannot break his promise. We can. We do so often. We do easily. We say we will do something and then we fail to perform it. We don't do it at the end of the day, though we've said that we will. But not with our God. It would be impossible for God to fail in keeping his promise. Hath God forgotten to be gracious? Nay, he hath not forgotten to be gracious. But why? Why has he held back? Why is it that he has not answered? Hath he in anger shut up his tender mercies? Why does he not hear? Why does he not answer? Why do all our prayers seem to go unanswered? There are so many questions, so many doubts that may come into our minds, so much darkness which may fill them. You know, Job had this very same problem. It's not a unique problem. Job chapter 30, verse 20. He writes this, I cry unto thee, and thou dost not hear me. I stand up, and thou regardest me not. My friends, we must not think it a strange thing when God does not immediately come to our aid, when he does not immediately answer us in our prayers to him. But why? Why does he do this? My friends, hard as it seems, it is for our good. I have spoken already of the danger of unbelief. I have spoken briefly and touched upon the sin of it. My friends, this leads us to greater faith if we respond in the right way. If we do the right thing when we are in darkness, then our faith will be strengthened by the exercise of it. Because we are having to put our faith into action. We are actually having to use our faith. We are actually having to trust in God when reason would argue otherwise. It strengthens our faith. It overall is of immense benefit to us that we cannot estimate or imagine. It is a precious thing. Even though it is a struggle, even though our spirit may be overwhelmed, we may feel lost and undone, but we must do the right thing. This is the second thing. What does the man of God do when he is in darkness? We've considered very briefly how the man of God may find himself in darkness and considered various ways it may happen. We've considered why it happens, by divine appointment from God, sovereign providence and wisdom for us. But now what must the man of God do? Well, the psalmist gives us a very good example. He sets the pattern for us perfectly, I might say, in this psalm. But if we turn back for a moment to Micah chapter 7, we see that this man has a resolution. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me. From which we can discern that the one primary thing that must be done when a man is in darkness, and he sees no help, even from the Lord his God, he must yet look to the Lord. Why? Because if you look anywhere else, the darkness, even though it is pitch black. I've already used the illustration of the countryside at night, on a cloudy night. As far as I can think, it cannot get any darker, in a physical sense, with that illustration. But if you look anywhere else, the darkness does become darker. The darkness merely gets darker and darker and darker, blacker and blacker and blacker. The only way to the light is to look to the Lord. The Lord shall be a light unto me. Jesus Christ, the light of the world. It is the only place to look. But how must we look? We see in the second half of the psalm a splendid illustration of this. I will remember the years of the right hand of the Most High. He will look back and he will remember the years when the power of the Most High, that is what is inferred by the right hand, the power of the Most High was seen. And so he will look back. I will remember. I will meditate, he says. And in remembering, meditating, from those things he finds great strength, comfort, and consolation. He looks back. He sees what the Lord has done. He sees what the Lord is able to do. We see this here. He meditates first of all upon his greatness. Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary, his holiness. Who is so great a God as our God? Thou art the God that doest wonders. Thou hast declared thy strength amongst the people. And we see him in history. Thou hast with thine arm redeemed thy people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph. And from this there may be an important lesson to learn. When we are in darkness, it is a good thing to look back upon our own salvation. We do that. We can look at it with some confidence and we can say, my God has saved me. My God has done the greatest thing for me that could be imagined or thought of. How then can I fail to trust him for these smaller things? How then can I fail to trust him who has delivered my soul from hell when I am in darkness? And even though he does not respond, there is no value in looking anywhere else. Looking anywhere else will lead to greater darkness and despair and eventually damnation. Why should I look anywhere else? His trust and his confidence in God is strengthened as he looks back to that great and momentous event in his history, which was his conversion. Redeemed his people. He has done it. It is finished. The sons of Jacob and Joseph. We see then he looks back over his personal history, as it were, as we might call it. But we can also look back over a general history. And we can look back over the time when the Lord has truly blessed certain men in their ministries. We can look back at some of the finest heroes of the past who have passed down to us. We can think of Spurgeon. We can think of Whitefield. We can think of the great revivals of the past centuries. We can take encouragement from these. We would not take the line of some brethren who will say, well, that was those days. We can't expect these kinds of things now. Well, our God has not changed. We can pray for them, all right. We can hope for them, all right. And we can trust God that he will perform them in our time, if it is his will, if it will bring glory to his name. These things must be an encouragement to us, not because they are historical events which are now past, done and dusted, as it were, never to be seen again, such works of this magnitude, but rather as monuments of what God is able to do. Such is the right way of seeing these things, looking back. But he goes on. This is not all. I know time is running out fast. Let me just briefly comment upon the last few verses here. We see also what he notes and what he meditates upon with regard to the reaction to the presence of God. The reaction to the presence of God. The waters saw thee, O God. The waters saw thee. They were afraid. The depths are troubled. The clouds poured out water. The skies sent out a sound. Thine arrows also went abroad. The voice of thy thunder was in heaven. The earth trembled and shook, etc. And so he goes on. And he meditates upon the greatness of God. How the very nature itself reacts to the presence of God. How very nature of the world is at God's command, at his call. And hence we read, thine arrows also went abroad. All things are under his direction and his control. The clouds, the skies, the thunder and the lightning and the earth, the sea, the great waters. All these things are in his hands. How can he not then care for us? How then can he forget us? How then can his mercy have gone and his promise fail towards us? How can he cast off his chosen people when he is so great and he has redeemed his people? Well, my friends, we read in verse 20, thou leddest thy people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron. Closes with this encouragement. The Lord leads his people, even in the darkness. They're described here as a flock, which gives a sense of their weakness, their vulnerability. The Lord knows it. He knows that they sit in darkness. He knows everyone who sits in darkness. My friends, he sees, but he tests. He tests his people. Will they be faithful? That they may come forth as gold. It may be a burning, fiery furnace we go through. Yet if the Lord is with us, all must be well for us. All must be well for our souls. Nothing can go amiss if we are looking to the Lord, if his eye is upon us. And we may say with confidence, rejoice not against me, O mine enemy. When I fall, I shall rise. When I sit in darkness, the Lord shall be a light unto me. May the Lord bless these things to our souls tonight. Amen.